The following is a presentation from the MJCast, the internet's premier podcast on all things Michael Jackson.
I'm a Black American. I am proud of who I am.
Together, we can make a change in the world.
I want to see you!
I like to take sounds and put them under the microscope.
There's a driving bass, you become the bass. Let the music write itself.
I don't sing it if I don't mean it.
Welcome to the MJCast, your source of news, discussion, and interviews on the King of Pop.
Hello, and welcome to the MJCast, your source of news and discussion on the King of Pop. I'm Shawn Shackelford, your host for this special episode. You may have heard me on the MJCast before as a panelist, and over the years, I have dropped subtle hints to Jamin and Elise about wanting to explore the Michael Jackson's late 70s era. And I'm grateful that they've given me this opportunity and honor of hosting this special episode. And today, I'm excited to dive into one of the earlier eras of Michael Jackson's legacy and a defining chapter in the story of the Jacksons, their 1978 album, Destiny. This wasn't just an album. It was a statement of purpose. It marked the first time the brothers took full creative control, writing, producing, and shaping the music entirely on their own terms. Coming off the Gamble and Huff years, a stretch that helped shape the group's sound post-Motown, the Jacksons were ready to stand on their own. After learning from the best of the best at Motown and Philadelphia International, the brothers wanted a chance to prove themselves. They felt ready to take full creative control and define their own sound without outside producers. But as much as the brothers felt confident in their abilities, CBS still tapped Bobby Colomby, drummer and founding member of the rock band Blood, Sweat, and Tears, to serve as executive producer. Destiny also marked the start of the Jacksons' longtime musical collaboration with Greg Phillinganes, who stepped in as arranger and whose keyboard work would become a defining element of their sound. In the album, you can hear the influence of Earth, Wind & Fire and Stevie Wonder, while showcasing vocal and songwriting partnerships, especially between Michael and Randy, that would evolve and echo through their careers. This era also saw Michael emerge as a fully formed creative force, bringing emotional complexity, studio innovation, and vocal stylings. This would become trademarks in his solo career. Destiny was the launchpad for everything to come, setting the stage for Off the Wall just 1 year later. And the impact didn't stop there. Nearly a decade later, their little sister Janet Jackson would take the very same blueprint, independence, authorship, and command of her own narrative, and flip the industry on its head with her album, Control. The DNA of Destiny runs deep through the entire Jackson legacy. The album spawned hits like the dance floor classic, Blame It On The Boogie, and the explosive top 10 smash, Shake Your Body Down to the Ground, a track that not only lit up the charts, but became a permanent part of the Jacksons' live legacy. From the personal to the reflective, from gospel to funk, Destiny was a fully realized body of work and far more than just a disco-era release. This Roundtable episode will dive deep into Destiny, the context, the creation, the album, the cover art, the tour, the aftermath, and why this body of work deserves far more respect in the canon of not just Michael Jackson and the Jacksons, but Black musical excellence overall. Joining me are fellow MJ enthusiasts and experts as we break down the tracks, the era, the context, and the legacy of Destiny. Whether you're a lifelong fan or just discovering this gem, this conversation is for you. So before we get started, let me introduce our roundtable participants. First up, Samar Habib. Samar is a Jackson family fan of over 40 years, contributor to many Michael Jackson-related projects and publications, an award-winning media professional of over 25 years, and a longtime friend of the show. Samar, how are you?
Hi, Shawn. I'm good. I'm very good, and I'm really happy to be here, and it's one of my favorite albums, so let's go.
Good deal, good deal. Glad to have you on again, and I'm always excited when I get to be on the show with you. And we have two newcomers to the MJCast. First, Jay Leggett, who is a longtime fan and Jackson family collector, who who is currently residing on the West Coast. Jay, welcome to the MJCast. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Shawn. Thank you for having me here.
Good deal. Good deal. Been following you on social media for a few years, and I know the passion that you bring to this conversation. I know that you're a wealth of knowledge about the Jacksons, so I'm glad to have you here.
I appreciate it, sir.
No problem. And finally, we have joining us Scorpeze, a Detroit-born, Chicago-based producer, songwriter, and musician. He's one half of the dance fusion duo Wendy Moto, and his work has been featured by artists like Zoe, Fonte, Eric Roberson, and former Joe Budden podcast co-host Rory. Since 2018, he's been making waves with veteran DJ Cordell Johnson, blending vintage vibes with modern soul. He's also one half of one of my favorite podcasts, Truth and Soul. Scorpeze, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Shawn. It is fantastic to be here. I'm very excited.
Good deal. Good deal. So, all right, gentlemen, we are ready. I am ready to geek out on the music of the Jacksons. And honestly, what a joy that is. You know, this roundtable is about celebrating the sound, the creativity, and the legacy of Michael, Marlon, Randy, Tito, and Jackie. And, you know, too often when people bring up the Jackson family, the focus shifts away from the music. And that's a shame because the music is phenomenal. But most importantly, that's how we know them, right? And so today, I want to change that narrative and dive deep into one of their most important and underrated albums, Destiny. So let's get started, gentlemen. But before we do that, before we jump into Destiny, I think we have to go back to, I believe, June 30th, 1975. Now, June 30th is my mother's birthday. But also on that day, Joe Jackson called a press conference at the Rainbow Grill in Manhattan to announce that the Jackson 5 will be leaving Motown. You know, as a result, they were going to get a higher royalty rate, I think about 20%, and then they would get greater creative control. We also know that, you know, Jermaine would not be joining them and that Randy would be taking his place. What's interesting is that he called that on June 30th, 1975, but the brothers were still under contract with Motown until 1976. So that's where we want to start with this conversation. And I know Michael had talked a lot about those Gamble and Huff years and how much of a part it played in the development of the sound. So, gentlemen, let's start there. Let's talk about those Gamble and Huff years really, really briefly, because I believe the Gamble and Huff years is another show altogether. But let's talk about the part that it played in shaping the Jackson sound.
Okay, I'll go ahead and kick it off if you will allow me.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
All right. So for quite some time prior to this, the brothers had been wanting to have a stake in the creation of their own music, the writing and the producing. They felt that they were ready. And they tried it on their own, if anybody remembers, with a group called MDLT Willis. So these were 4 young ladies that were managed by Joe Jackson, and they released a single. The A side was, I believe, called What's Your Game? And I believe the B side was called Running and Pushing. And they appeared on Soul Train to perform What's Your Game? Both songs are credited to, written and produced by the Jackson 5. Now, for reasons unknown, after the release of What's Your Game single, we never heard from MDLT Willis again. Okay. So this was nothing new. This is something that had been building up for quite some time now. And prior to this announcement, Michael took it upon himself at the age of, in 1975, Michael would have been 17, took it upon himself to meet with Berry Gordy and present his case for the brothers writing and producing their own material. Berry Gordy didn't think it was such a good idea. And Berry's refusal to allow them to do so is what leads us to the CBS contract.
Well, that's really fascinating because everything that happened with the Jacksons at Motown happened to other artists at Motown as well. Berry was very kind of reluctant to let go of control, especially when it came to songwriting. He had Motown had its own philosophy. And obviously Marvin Gaye, for example, What's Going On, Berry Gordy didn't want to release that album. You know, they had an idea for what the record company was supposed to do. So what the Jacksons were doing wasn't unusual for them, and it wasn't unusual for Motown artists. It was something that all of the Motown artists were going through. For some reason, Stevie Wonder was able to do whatever he wanted at the record label. I'm sure someone can come in later and explain why that was the case. But even when Marvin Gaye wanted to write his own stuff and like not be controlled about what he wanted to write about, you know, Berry would kind of balk at that. So the Jacksons wanted to have more input into what they were doing. Again, it created conflict with Berry Gordy, who was happy to let them go eventually. Like, you know, think of what the Jacksons and then Michael did later. Berry was so adamant on keeping control of the system that he was willing to let them go. And, you know, they were family. Like Jermaine was married to his daughter, and, you know, MJ had pretty much been raised within the Motown family, and obviously the same for the rest of the Jackson kids. So it's really interesting how Berry was willing to say, okay, well, we've done everything we could. We don't want to give you this kind of right to do whatever you want to do and have creative control at the record label. Shook hands and was happy to let them go. And then obviously they go on and do incredible things. So it wasn't unusual what the Jacksons were asking for at Motown.
And I think that Gamble and Huff were the hot producers of the time, right? They were the LA and Babyface of their day. And so it makes a lot of sense that, you know, going over to CBS, that the powers that be felt that Gamble and Huff would be the perfect duo to work with the brothers, considering their success with the OJs, Lou Rawls, Patti LaBelle, among others. And so it made sense for that to be the case.
I mean, it's basically hedging your bets, you know, instead of rolling the dice and letting these kids go in and make an album on your dime. Why not do everything we can to ensure hits? And at that time, like you said, Gamble and Huff, they had the hot hand, and they had been producing great results for the parent company, CBS, since 1972. And here we are in 1975, 76. And the hits were still rolling in at that time. So Gamble and Huff seemed like an insurance policy, so to speak.
And Michael talked about how what he learned during his time with Gamble and Huff, you know, how to put together a song. And it was during this time that Michael's first recording or a written composition, Blues Away, on the 1976 self-titled album, you know, and this was their opportunity. And so you could tell, like, they had two songs, if I'm not mistaken, on that album that they wrote. It was Michael wrote Blues Away, and then Style of Life, which I think was Michael and Tito.
Correct.
Credit to Michael and Tito, which, again, I think we need to do a show just on the Gamble and Huff years. Style of Life is one of my favorite songs off that album. But again, Michael talked a lot about how he learned how to, you know, from Gamble and Huff, how to put together a song, how to use his voice. And again, we also have to keep in mind that, you know, Jackson Mania had worn off, you know, that period between 69 and 72. And so between 73 and 75, you know, Michael's voice was transitioning. I don't think Motown really knew what to do with them at that time. And so this was, you know, CBS's opportunity to put them with some very skilled, and not to say that the producers at Motown weren't great producers, but it gave them an opportunity to really get Michael at that point of his career and his vocal development, and to really kind of pour into and teach him how to use his voice.
I don't mean to take it back to Motown for a second, but I always wondered if it was a little bit of a company arrogance when they let the Jackson 5 go, because it wasn't a smooth exit for them. It was several lawsuits that went from 76 to 81, and it was resulted with them losing their royalty rates and losing the name Jackson 5. One of the lawyers around 80 or 81 said, well, since we own the name, we can do the same thing with 5 more kids named Jackson and make them big stars. As we all know, that did not happen. But I've always wondered if that was also a big issue. No.
It was not a smooth transition at all. In fact, in the meeting between Michael and Berry promised Michael that he would always take care of the family as he had always done. And then so when Joe and Michael went out and got the CBS deal and then announced it, that's when Motown came back with, okay, that's fine. You guys are moving on, but what are you going to call yourselves?
Yes.
And that's where the contention started. And they were like, listen, we own the name the Jackson 5. We can pull 5 other anybody's off the street and call them the Jackson 5, and we'd be well within our rights to do so. And the Jacksons were sued by Motown for breach of contract.
Yes.
And the Jacksons lost that lawsuit. The Jacksons had to pay Motown's legal fees as well as the judgment.
Yes.
I want to say the judgment was in the area of $300,000. So it wasn't a smooth transition. It was we'll let you go, but we'll let you go with little scrapes and bruises on you.
And there were a war of words between the family and Motown for a long time, even to the point where Catherine, Mrs. Jackson, had to do an interview with Jet magazine and had to kind of lovingly check Jermaine for his comments about what he was saying, because he was saying, Motown did so much for us, and they put food in our stomachs and teeth in our mouth, and a roof over our heads. And Mr. Jackson said, no, we did that before they came around. We were doing that before Motown even signed the family. So they obviously reconciled at some point, because Michael and Barry still had a good relationship, as and Jermaine and the family got back together at some point. But yeah, there was some contention for about 5 or 6 years until everything kind of smoothed over. And yeah, I just want to say that. Sorry.
No, Jay, you're right, because every time the Jacksons released a product on Epic, Motown would release a product right behind it. And this happened all the way up until 1984.
Yes.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there was annoyance. There was annoyance too. I remember the vice president of Motown, when they announced they were leaving, was like, the family didn't even give us a time to like negotiate and talk with us. And Joe Jackson was like, yeah, we did. And you obviously didn't give us the respect and time to even want to negotiate. It was your way or no way. So we left.
And I think for all the criticism that Joe takes or has taken over the years, I always felt like he had his son's best interest at heart and wanting to, get them that creative control, get them what they really wanted. And so again, that's what led him to make that deal with CBS, because CBS guaranteed that they would give them that creative control. And so they worked with Gamble and Huff for 2 albums, the 1976 self-titled album and 1977's Going Places. And on both albums, the brothers had an opportunity to write for the first time. And after working with them, Gamble and Huff actually vouched for the Jacksons in their bid to produce an album, right?
This is correct.
Absolutely.
This is correct. Kenny Gamble recalls that in the Spike Lee documentary, Michael Jackson's Journey from Motown to Off the Wall. He says that he told CBS they can do it. Let them do it.
I just wanted to jump in, actually, just on the back of something that Scorpeze said earlier about how Motown would piggyback on the back of any releases that the Jacksons would make. And it did go on up until the 80s. So much so that Michael Jackson's first ever solo #1 in the UK was One Day in Your Life. Not when it was released originally, but when it was re-released, I think in 1981.
Yes, 1981. Interesting.
Post Off the Wall. So they'd piggybacked on the success of Rock With You and Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. Motown releases One Day in Your Life, and that goes to #1 in the UK. It's really interesting, because that turns out to be his first #1 in the UK. So I wonder how that played out for MJ in America. Like, the song has gone to #1 in the UK, not something that he released, but it's great for his kind of market share, and it's great for his publicity, right? So even though he's releasing his own music at the time, he's competing with his older self. It's something obviously that then happens much later on in his career.
Yeah.
And also about the Gamble and Huff stuff, right? As we were talking about the Jacksons, a self-titled album, what's really noticeable, obviously they are genius producers, but what's really noticeable is that the songs that I think, in my personal opinion, are the 2 songs that have aged the best are the ones written by the Jacksons, are the ones written by Michael. I think Blues Away is probably one of the best songs on the album. And the Style of Life I think is definitely the best song on the album. And it's one that Tito and Michael wrote, and also the Jacksons were involved in the production. And I think, interestingly, that they are the ones that have aged the best on that album. The other songs on the album sound very much of the time, especially something like Show You the Way to Go. Again, I think that might have been a number one in the UK.
I believe so.
Yeah, with the extended strings at the beginning, it's very much of the mid-70s, and it's very much of that kind of mid-disco sound, which I find fascinating, because the Jacksons seemed to be ahead of the game, even though they were only at the beginning of their own path, really.
And one of the things, and we'll talk a lot about this with Destiny, but with Blues Away, we start to hear elements of Michael's creativity that we would hear throughout the rest of his career, right? There's that little part of Blues Away where he's beatboxing, right?
Right. Absolutely.
He's doing something with his voice.
End, yes. Through his nose at the end.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, those are the elements that we're going to definitely see it when we start to talk about Destiny. But Michael was starting to put his imprint on his style and his sound with Blues Away.
Yeah, and I think it's also a theme that runs through his career. And I think he writes about this in Moonwalk, where it's a beautiful ballad and it's sung beautifully and melodiously, but it's a tragic story. And that is something that comes up time and again in Michael's music.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about that as well. Yeah. There are themes. There are themes that start with Blues Away that we will hear that we heard in on Going Places, but then we really hear it in Destiny, and it just takes off for the rest of his career. So was there was a rumor, right, that Maurice White was approached to produce the brothers coming into CBS?
Yes.
Am I correct about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He was approached for, apparently now we know the first Jackson's album, and of course later on Off the Wall. Jackie said in an interview around the time Destiny came out that Maurice had been approached, but he felt that he wasn't ready to take on that role at the time for them, so he kind of pulled out.
Speaking of Maurice White, I talked about Gamble and Huff being an insurance policy because they had the hot hand. Maurice White at this time was also on fire.
Absolutely.
Earth, Wind, and Fire does not get enough props in retrospect for their groundbreaking style and their level of success. These guys were on fire in the mid-70s. And not only did Maurice White get approached for some of these Jackson-related projects, but there was a signing over in Burbank. Mm-hmm. This young kid out of Minneapolis named Prince, they approached Maurice to produce his debut album as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's quite interesting that two biggest stars of the 80s and beyond, Maurice White was offered an opportunity to work with them. That's very interesting.
Now, with these Gamble and Huff albums, I think Samar had made the point that they sounded of the time. So what we see there, production-wise, is Gamble and Huff just inserting the Jacksons into their already made formula. So these Jacksons albums sounded no different than an OJ's album,
right,
or a Teddy Pendergrass album.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And those artists were older. These are guys in their 30s, maybe late 20s, stuff like that. The Jacksons are late teens, early 20s.
Yep.
So it's like when you see a little boy dressing in his father's clothes and they're kind of baggy and hanging off of him and stuff like that. It was kind of that effect. But Michael took the freedom that he was given, because with the Motown producers, namely Hal Davis, Michael sang as he was instructed. But like you said, Shawn, here you start to see Michael develop his signature vocal style here. He's given room to experiment. He's given room to feel things out and do things differently and see what works and what doesn't work. And it results in, frankly, in my opinion, dazzling vocal performances on both albums.
And no, I agree. And again, it sounds dated, but Show You the Way to Go, just the way Michael sings those lyrics. Even songs like Good Times. I mean, you heard Michael sing a ballad, but you didn't hear a song like that before. And even on the Going Places album, Find Me a Girl. I mean, just again, that seemed like it was ripped from the OJs, but just the way when they say, when I find her, what you gonna do? I'm gonna be good to her. Excuse me, I have to sing sometimes. Talking to Jackson.
You're going to have to sing throughout the whole show.
Exactly. But just the way that's new for Michael. And he commands it so well And so that
at 19.
exactly. And so it's just, you could just see that maturation, that progress in his vocal and his style. You can see it developing. You probably didn't see it at the time and you didn't really hear it at the time. But in hindsight, when you play those albums back to back to back, you can really see the development and you can see what Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff was doing for Michael.
Yeah, absolutely that. But there's just another thing I wanted to add about that little period, just pre-Destiny, is and talking about the sound being slightly off the time, that the Jacksons' image was very much of the time as well. So, and it was something that Michael talked about with their TV series, that, turning up dressed in suits with big bow ties. It wasn't what young kids in America were doing. Do you know what I mean? They had a kind of lounge style, but they were 17, 18-year-old kids. And they were all, I can't remember the word he uses. I think it probably was hokey.
Yeah.
But it's like there was a disconnect between their age and, his ambition and their ambition and what they look like on TV. Do you know what I mean? And I remember years later, nothing related to the Jacksons, but I remember Boyz II Men talking about their image when they used to go on awards shows and they used to have little bow ties with shorts, and then they'd turn up and sit next to Jodeci, and Jodeci would be wearing Carcani and like all different labels and balaclavas and stuff. And they were like, this is ridiculous. We're turning up, looking like we're going to university. And these guys are turning up looking like they're just going, living their normal day-to-day lives. And I think that was a similar situation with the Jacksons. They were still being presented in a very clean-cut bubblegum way, which when we get to the Destiny album, that literally just disappears.
You're absolutely right, Summer. You're absolutely right about that. One of the reasons that we have Dancing Machine, the song, is because the brothers had heard from their friends that they couldn't dance to their music.
Incredible. Imagine that. Yeah.
Like the brothers' friends, like teenagers, were not able to connect with the Jackson 5's music during that time. So you're absolutely dead on, Summer, about their image versus who they actually were.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great transition into the TV show. And what I wanted to talk about there was how the narrative around this time was how the Jacksons had fallen off, right? The Jackson mania from 69 to 72 had worn off, and everything that they were releasing, that they were doing, was seen as a comeback. But I will make the argument that, and especially within the Black community, because I was a Black kid during that time, is that they were wildly popular in the Black community. And I think that TV show, although I think Michael talked about later about how he didn't necessarily like it or enjoy it, but I will tell you, it was must-see TV, at the time where, we got in front of that TV. We had an opportunity to see the Jacksons, and this was different because you didn't have a lot of Black entertainers who were giving their own shows. I mean, you had Flip Wilson and you had, the few sitcoms, but to have a group like the Jacksons have their own TV show, I think that really speaks to the popularity that they maintained throughout the 70s. Although the narrative will tell you differently, they were wildly popular within the Black community.
So just on that, actually, Shawn, it's so fascinating because this is something I really wanted to talk about, because this is an era where this is where I've really first ever heard about the Jacksons. My sisters used to be Jacksons fans, or Jackson 5 fans. They're older than me. And they used to get into arguments at school about the Osmonds versus the Jacksons. Because obviously the Osmonds, or Donny Osmond and his sister, used to have their own TV show probably around the same time, I think. And the kind of racial dynamics of that, like having this Black family who's being televised into people's houses on a weekly basis, is like, I don't think that happens now, does it? Really, like a family? I don't even think you'd get that now. So it would have been revolutionary in the 70s, but also it's like, for us in the UK, they were a huge deal, the Jacksons, and especially for people of color in this country, because we weren't getting anything. I mean, you would have these kind of arguments in playgrounds in this country. Oh no, Donny Osmond, like, this, and then you'd have the Jacksons fans talking about, Jermaine or Michael or whoever. And that's also, again, another theme that goes throughout the Jacksons, especially Michael's career. I've got to kill any association with the child Michael. And it's something that he obviously spoke to Donny Osmond about years later when Donny was releasing, I think it was Soldier of Love, like in the late 80s. And he said, the problem is, Donny, your name is mud.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. Like no one wants to buy a Donny Osmond album in the late 1980s. your name is Mud, you're just going to have to get rid of your surname. Donnie took offense to that, but he also admits, actually, I think Michael was right. People were still connecting him to young Donny Osmond or little Donny Osmond. And it's a constant theme throughout, again, Michael's career. He's always trying to kill the last iteration of himself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So he's always remodeling himself, repurposing himself. And what you'd mentioned about people were saying the Jacksons were over at this stage. They were saying Michael was over after Thriller. They were saying Michael was over after Bad. It was like every time like any Jackson releases any album, even Janet, she's over. But last year she was in the UK selling out concerts over here. So it's like, it's just a theme that maybe the press loves to hold on to. Oh, it's over. And then they release an album that's bigger than everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that TV show is this, you got an opportunity to see Michael again. I got a chance to see him in a different light. I mean, the skits were hokey, the costumes were hokey, but man, there were some dance numbers that not only that he did, but the whole family. Like, you really got a chance to see how talented all of them were. I mean, they introduced Reby into they had already, I think, introduced Reby into the act in Vegas, but to actually see how talented they all were. Again, I don't think that show gets enough credit for what it meant culturally, but then what it also meant in terms of showing a Black family, as you said, Summer, a Black family on TV and showing how talented they are. And it was just another step in the maturation and the progress and the development, I should say, of Michael Jackson.
Immediately, 2 or 3 things just came into my head, and I know all of you will recognize these. It's Michael dancing with the Nicholas brothers.
Yep.
Yes.
And tap dancing. He was so brilliant doing that, and we never saw him tap dance again. So that's like, it's this incredible thing that he does this one-off time, and you look at him and you're like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And you just know he's got that in the locker somewhere. I mean, I'm sure he breaks out some moves somewhere else later on in his career. There's also that incredible performance where the brothers are popping and locking quite early. I think it's him and Marlon.
It was a skit with Dom DeLuise. Yes.
Oh my goodness! And you watch them and you look at them, and you don't really see MJ or even Marlon like putting on those moves later on in their career or on tour. And you just know they've got it in their back pocket anytime they want to break it out. Do you know what I mean? And you just think, like you say, the talent, my God, like it's just unending. It's just like how much more talent can one family or one person be blessed with? It's just incredible.
I think that separated them from a lot of the other acts that were the so-called kid acts at that time, because most of them kind of faded out by 74, 75. The Jacksons kept going on. And it's something funny you mentioned that. It's funny that you mentioned that Donny Osmond thing. There's an article from '77 when the show got canceled. Jackson's show got canceled. They called Donny Osmond the first MJ impersonator, and I wondered why. But then I had to remember about from those years prior, they were considered the white counterparts of the J5. So there was always something there lingering, I think, in the background for some people in the culture about the Osmonds and the Jackson 5. Yeah, no worries.
Well, I was just going to say on that, you probably do know the Osmond song, One Bad Apple.
Yes.
Which, to all intents and purposes, literally sounds like something from the Jackson 5's first album.
Absolutely.
And it's so clearly modeled on their sound. So, yeah, I mean, and that's quite interesting because usually it's the Black artists who are called, oh, this is the Black Elvis. So it's an interesting flip to then have, oh, they're the White Jacksons.
Yeah, all those different performances that I can remember. They did what was it? The flat floogie with the flat foot floogie with the Floyd. Say that 3 times. I just remember that because I think they did that with the entire family, and you could just see how even LaToya and Reby, just how talented they were as dancers and how in sync they were. If you could just go and pull up these different skits that they did, just pull them up and take a look at it. I'm amazed. Even now, I'm still amazed. It's funny now that you talk about when you bring up the Jacksons name, people tend to roll their eyes, and the first thing they want to go to is all of the controversy, all of the other, tabloid nonsense. But when you stop and go back and watch some of these things, you realize just how talented they were and how fun they were to watch and to enjoy.
Let me put a pin in this right quick. Building on what Samar said and what you're saying also, Shawn, that show was must-see TV back then.
Yep.
The reason why Motown was so laissez-faire about the musical output of the Jackson 5 is because even though they had come down from the heights of Jackson Mania, they were still solid money makers. Whatever you put out with J5 on it was going to sell. And Motown's thinking was, who cares what we put, what music is on the albums? They're still going to sell, doesn't matter. Just put it out there so we can sell it to them. But so there's always, so like Samar said, that popularity never quite went away. It may have quieted a bit, but it never really went away. And as far as Michael's feelings on the show, yes, it showcased his talent to a primetime audience in a way that hadn't been done since Ed Sullivan and the Hollywood Bowl in 1970. But to quote Michael, and I love this Michael quote because it's so definitive, quote Michael Jackson, "I hated every minute of it." So when you're watching this and you're awestruck by how great these performances are, you have to think that Michael is on that set just burning with rage the entire time. That puts a different frame on it when you look at it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It really does. There's a quote from the producer of the show when the show was going on, and I just wanted to bring that up because it's kind of predicts what Michael was going to do later on in his life. It's from Bill Davis. He's positioning quick like Sam Davis Jr., and he seems to float effortlessly like Fred Astaire. Several choreographers, including our own Anita Mann, have indicated to me that Michael has an emerging style that's the closest thing to the incomparable Fred Astaire. We've known for some time that Michael was quick, but this smooth floating quality a la Astaire is rapidly becoming more apparent. Just want to put that out there.
Oh, absolutely. Again, in hindsight, we can see so much more of what Michael will become. At the time, you probably didn't. A lot of fans didn't, but it's very apparent now. And so sticking with that theme of just how popular Michael was and the brothers were, Michael had the opportunity to then transition from the small screen to the big screen, The Wiz. And so that movie was released in October 24th, 1978. And I will tell you, I was 6 years old at the time, a huge Michael Jackson fan. I remember going to see it as a kid, and I was always just amazed that, the theater was packed. And when Michael came on, there was a murmur throughout the theater because everybody was excited to see Michael. And when he sang "You Can't Win," that song was another step in the maturation process and the development, because you never really heard him sing a song like that. And there are two versions, right? You get the version that's in the movie, but then they also released a single. And so even the way Michael sings it, he does that, "I can't get out of the rain," that part, you never heard Michael. And then when you hear him sing that, like even now when I hear him sing that part, it just sends chills down my spine because it's just, you can see it, you can hear, what's there. And to hear him really just, I don't know, it's hard to put in words. So yes, we have "You Can't Win," and that is Michael and Quincy Jones for the first time, right?
Yes, Shawn, I want to say that what you're hearing in Michael's vocal approach in "You Can't Win" is jazz.
Yep.
That's what you're hearing. That slurring of the words and sliding everything together and the swooping. And if you listen to how he delivers that vocal, he does it in a very jazzy way.
Yep.
So that's what I think is so striking about that particular vocal performance. People keep saying,
Yes.
That's very jazzy.
Yep.
And I think that's a part of what made Quincy's ears perk up.
And it's an overlooked, I think, masterpiece, a master vocal performance by Michael, both versions. And it was a popular song again on Black radio stations. The younger fans will remember it as there was a B-side. Which single was it for? Was it Billie Jean?
It was all the singles on Thriller.
Can't Get Out of the Rain. They retitled it "Can't Get Out of the Rain," but it was really You Can't Win Part 2. So when it was released as a 45, 'cause I have the actual 45, there was You Can't Win Part 1 and You Can't Win Part 2. And You Can't Win Part 2 was later titled Can't Get Out of the Rain, and that's what you hear on those B-sides from the Thriller era.
You first see it on the B-side of The Girl Is Mine.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
the writing credit is Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson.
Interesting that happened.
That is the only song credited to Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson's writers.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So again, you have that Michael Jackson effect on The Wiz. Although The Wiz was panned by critics, it's one of those movies that has endured, and I think it's lasted this long and it has an appeal this long for one reason and one reason only, and that's Michael Jackson. I think we were able to see we could kind of, now you go back and listen to that song, you can predict the next step, and the next step was Destiny.
Before we go there, I want to follow up on that point.
Yes, sir.
You make a good point, Shawn, about the popularity of The Wiz in Black America.
Yes, sir.
When I was coming up, they would show The Wiz on television every year. They would also show The Wizard of Oz on television every year, once a year. So imagine my surprise when in adulthood, I find out that The Wiz was a complete critical and commercial failure. I had no idea. Based on the reaction within Black America, I thought it was a hugely successful, popular thing. I had no idea it was a failure until I was a grown man. So there's many reasons for that. But yeah, you're right about the effect on Black America. As a matter of fact, Barry Michael Cooper, who is the journalist who coined the phrase New Jack Swing, if you go back to the Spike Lee documentary for Off the Wall, Barry Cooper says, I don't know about everybody else, but everybody in my neighborhood went to go see The Wiz for Mike Jackson. So what you say, Shawn, is absolutely valid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I went to, now I'm going to draw a blank on this, but you're from Detroit, Scorp, so you know that it's a theater across the street from Eastland Mall.
I'm a West Sider, so
we went to see it there, and it was a movie theater full of Black people. Again, I think we were all excited for one reason and one reason only: Michael Jackson. And every time he was on the screen, people were excited.
I just wanted to interject, actually, Shawn, regarding what you were saying about Michael's influence on The Wiz, because I think there's also a reverse of that. It's the Wiz's influence on Michael. And I think also he writes about this in his book, about how he really loved the makeup process.
Yep.
And how he was able to become another person because of the hours he'd spend in makeup and getting the latex or whatever applied to him. And how as soon as he had that makeup on, tragically, he felt liberated. He felt like he was able to be stupid and just jump around and do things that he probably couldn't do as Michael Jackson. That is, again, something that affects him later on in his career and his life, I guess. He's always trying to redesign himself, reconfigure himself. And, when you see Thriller 4 or 5 years later, that is a product of The Wiz, really. Like, it's him going through the makeup process to become something else in the video and become something other than just this like 2D Michael Jackson product. He becomes this 3D, 4D entity that can do anything. So there's actually an effect on him for being in the film, and also spending time in New York with LaToya. Again, they talk about that. I think J. Randy Taraborelli talks about that in his book on Michael, about the time Michael spent away from Joseph, away from the family, and hanging out with LaToya, and them starting to go to Studio 54 and clubs and the club scene where they'd been completely sheltered in Havenhurst and in California, whereas now they're in New York and they're able to experience real life for the first time. Bear in mind, these guys were millionaires at this stage and they'd never been able to kind of go to a nightclub by themselves. There's really good videos of MJ being like hanging out at Studio 54, and you've never seen him like that before, just completely relaxed, surrounded by other celebrities, surrounded by other people, dancers and kind of entertainers. And he's not the only person being looked at in the club. This is pre-Thriller, obviously, because post-Thriller, he does go Studio 54 again. But after that, he's not able to go to a club ever again in his life, I don't think, without being stared at. But there's an effect on him from The Wiz that profoundly changes him as a person.
Yeah. So that's a great point. That's a great point that it did have an effect on him in terms of, you're right, wanting to make up, wanting to experience, transforming into another character. So that's an outstanding point.
The makeup solved a problem from here for him directly, and that was his acne.
Yep.
At this point in his life, Michael Jackson had really bad acne, and it was a great source of anguish and shame for him. And it had a lasting effect on his psyche, obviously, for the rest of his life. But the makeup allowed him to not focus on that, to make it go away, at least for that while.
Yeah. What I've always found interesting about him and his skin condition and his acne was the fact that Elvis Presley also had terrible skin and also had terrible acne. They're not connected at all in any way. I just find it really interesting that it's something that plagued both of them. And also Marilyn Monroe, like, who's another huge Hollywood icon, like, was always paranoid about her nose. It's people fixate on certain things, right? Like, I suppose the saying is that people are never going to be happy, but yeah, there's always something that they're trying to, that keeps them from being happy, I guess.
Yeah. So that takes us to Destiny. So as we've talked about before, this was their opportunity to produce themselves, write for themselves. And the album was released. Now there's some differing dates of whether or not it was November or December, but it was released the winter of 1978. And what we know is that despite a dip in sales from the initial J5 run, the Jacksons were still wildly popular. Right On Magazine, they were always on the covers of Right On Magazine, Soul Magazine, Jet, and Ebony. This was their 10th anniversary in the business, or just about in terms of being signed. And so they were still being heavily promoted on shows like Soul Train, American Bandstand, and even Midnight Special. And so they were still very popular, but this album was viewed as a comeback. But I guess the question I want to pose to you all is this album, and we'll talk about this as we go through, because we're going to go through track by track, but is this album a concept album? Is this something that they really, that had a theme to it? And so I just want you guys to be thinking about that. And I don't know if we want to answer that question now or jump into the album and then answer it at the end. As I talked about in my intro, there's a lot of influence that you hear on this album, from, the folk influence, the Isley Brothers, the Earth, Wind and Fire. You really do get some outstanding horn arrangements by Tom 84 and the Phoenix Horns. And so this album, I think, really stands out of all the albums in 1978. And so I want to jump right into it, if that's okay with you guys.
Absolutely. I do think that we need to make it a point to note that this was a critical time in the Jacksons' career. The self-titled 1976 album did go gold. It was below the standard, below what CBS was looking for, but still, gold was nothing to sneeze at, especially in the 70s. Now the standard is platinum, but back then gold was, success. Going Places did not fare as well. So Going Places is seen as a failure. At this time, CBS was seriously considering dropping the group. And it was at this point that, once again, Michael took it upon himself. And I like to kind of guide people to the notion that Michael was the leader of the group. Even though he was one of the youngest, the brothers kind of followed him. And so Michael took it upon himself to go speak with Ron Alexenberg, who's the president of Epic at the time, who actually signed them to the label. And he told Ron, he said, listen, if you just let us do our thing, you won't regret it. And Ron said, hey, I believe this kid. Go ahead. But again, they still weren't 100% convinced. They wanted to hedge their bets.
Yep.
So they sent the brothers in with Bobby Colomby and Mike Atkinson. And like you said, Bobby Colomby was the drummer of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, but he had transitioned and he was working in an executive capacity at CBS Records. His big win prior to Destiny was signing and producing the debut album for Weather Report bassist Jaco Pastorius.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So CBS was still hedging their bets. They still weren't quite sure.
Also, Walter Yannick would later on, be the one to get Michael help to get on MTV. did not believe in them at this time. He thought they were over. They were a kid act. And it was, again, Ron Eisenberg pushing for the Jacksons to give them that chance, because Yetnikov was pretty much over it with them. And he didn't want to, he was kind of ready to like just cut them loose.
Very true.
Yeah. Funny story about Bobby Colomby. This article I read about him producing the brothers and how he had to lock Joe out of the studio because, as he said, he was a bloody nuisance. And Bobby felt the best thing to do was to lock him out. Funny part about the story is that when he discovered that he couldn't get in, Joe called the police, who came to investigate. And the police asked Bobby, do you know who this man is? And Bobby said, nope, I don't know who he is. They kept him out. I think Bobby kind of knew that, again, and I give Joe credit for, having his kids' best interests at heart. But I think also Bobby also knew that, what? Your sons need some space. Your sons need an opportunity to grow without you breathing down their necks. And I certainly don't want you breathing down my neck as well. Let us work, and we'll keep you posted.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Joe, according to Bobby, Joe just sucked the air out of the room whenever he was there. So he had to go in order for creativity to flow. It had to work that way.
Ron Reisner, in his book a few years ago, he described Joe as a nightmare. And he said that he was partly the reason why the label wanted to drop the brothers, because he liked Michael and the brothers, but they didn't want to deal with Joe anymore. Joe had to bring Freddie the Man, Ron Reisner in there to be to be his filter,
a buffer. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. He said they were the reason why they were part of the stagnation, and he described Joe as a street guy, a hustler, and not exactly personality plus. So yeah, that was not working in his favor at all.
I did take a look at Ron Weisner's book. Ron Weisner has a lot of experience in the entertainment field as an artist manager. He and his partner, Freddie the Man, were also Madonna's managers in the early 80s and for quite some time.
Yes.
Ron Weisner, I would caution anyone who picks up Weisner's book to take it with a grain of salt, because when I read it, I found some straight up lies in that book having to do with Michael in that situation. So yeah, it's a good source of knowledge, and it's true. A lot of people did not want to deal with Joe. Joe's way of doing business was very heavy-handed. The way that he dealt with his sons is the way he dealt with everybody else.
Absolutely.
Which is interesting, because obviously years later, when Michael is facing much more trying times, it's Joe that he relies on. He recognizes in Joe, actually, sometimes you need someone like that around you.
Yeah, true.
But something actually you said, Scorp, about Jaco Pastorius, as soon as you mention his name, it's like I get goosebumps, because I'm a massive Joni Mitchell fan, right? So Jaco plays bass on like probably her greatest albums, Hegira, and I think he plays on Court and Spark, but he plays on The Hissing of Summer Lawns as well.
He plays on Don Juan's Reckless Daughter. And
Don Juan's Reckless Daughter as well. I mean, that is just a great pair for Joni. But as soon as you mentioned his name, I was like, oh my goodness. It's like you're talking about some religious figure or something.
And oh my God, he's great. I'm going to have to.
Yeah. No, and it's, but something about the leading up to the release of Destiny. We'll get to the album, I'm sure, at some point. But there's threats. Threats are coming in at this stage, because I think around the same time, probably a couple of months earlier, Prince has just released his debut album. Like the Minneapolis sound is basically starting to get a foothold. And then also, I think the Sugar Hill Gang release Rapper's Delight probably just a few months after the album comes out. So what Motown used to describe as the sound of young America, the sound of Black America, the kind of points are starting to change a little bit. It's not just Motown who dominates the airwaves anymore. Like the sound is coming from different parts of America and different parts of the country. And the sound is different as well now. So the Jacksons are operating within a field where Motown had dominated for so many years and the disco sound had dominated for so many years, but there are new threats that are developing around them around this period.
You're absolutely right, Summer. So you've got Prince's debut album, For You, comes out in April of 1978, and then you've got Destiny coming out in November or December of 1978, and then you have Rapper's Delight coming out in either spring or summer of 1979.
Right.
So bookending the album, that denotes a sea change
in
pop music and specifically Black music at the time. So, like Summer said, things were definitely changing as far as sounds were concerned.
So let's jump right into Destiny and the first track on the album, Blame It On The Boogie. So one of the things about Destiny is that you are going to hear signature vocal ad-libs that Michael will use for the remainder of his career. And 7 seconds into Blame It On The Boogie, you get probably his most famous, most recognizable signature vocal ad-libs, and you hear it for the very first time.
You need to sing it, Shawn.
You really There you go.
You get the he now.
Tens all around.
Yes. So you get that for the first time. Now, what's interesting is, and I didn't pick this up the first time, Matthew Allen, who was supposed to join us, but he had to bow out for personal reasons. But he mentioned that, you get 4 he-he's, or you get 4 he's, right? In this one. Typically, you just get a he, a 3. But this one, you get 4. So this is the first time you hear the he, and you get 4 of them, 7 seconds in. And then you also hear, obviously, the Blame It On Yourself, which is an ad-lib that Michael resurrected during the Scream, on the Scream song off the History album. And then, Scorp, I think you brought up another one from Stevie Wonder, right?
So the he originates with Stevie.
Okay, there you
go. So we first hear that he thing with Stevie back in 1972 on the Talking Book album. And it's a song called Maybe Your Baby. So if you go back and listen to that song, you'll hear amongst the vocal layers, Stevie doing that falsetto he type of thing. And then adding in that they were label mates at the time, and then they had that close relationship. They were recording together. And Michael mentioned that he actually sat in for the Songs in the Key of Life sessions. He said he watched that album be made. And they're cousins. They're actually related. So it's not far-fetched to think that Michael might have picked that idea up from Stevie.
Right. So Blame It On The Boogie was a remake, right? So it was written, or actually I believe it was written and sung by a gentleman named Mick Jackson. And so as Michael has talked about, I said, we heard Blame It On The Boogie when we were listening to a series of tapes, and this song was 6 years old. We recorded it as soon as we heard it and put it out as a single. I've heard the other version and it's okay, but it hasn't got the groove like ours has. He only put out his version when we had ours, when he'd heard ours, which wasn't a very nice thing to do because the record company had promised us that wouldn't happen. And so Mick Jackson then released it. And if you listen to the two, it almost sounds like Mick, it's a decent song. His version is decent. It sounds like a guide vocal for Michael. And so it was, let me go back and say, it's not necessarily a remake because the Jacksons, I think, recorded it and released it first, and then Mick Jackson then put his out, as Michael said. But also on this song, we hear the first appearance of Jerry Hay and the Sea Wind horns on an MJ project, which we would hear throughout his career. So, gentlemen, what's your take on Blame It On The Boogie?
Well, firstly, it's one of my favorite trivia pieces of Michael Jackson pop trivia. That Blame It On The Boogie is written by a guy. His name's actually Michael Jackson, abbreviated to Mick Jackson. So my favorite piece of Michael Jackson trivia is that Blame It On The Boogie is written by Michael Jackson, but not the Michael Jackson, not the Michael Jackson. What I really love about the song, so the song, I don't know if it's true in America, but it's very true in this country. It's probably the most popular Jackson song on UK radio. When they play a Jackson song, probably even more than Billie Jean or anything else, Blame It On The Boogie is the song they usually play on the radio. And what I love really so much about it is that it's something, again, that shows up later on in Michael's career, but it's the power of Black American music and what Black American music can do. So you have white musicians and songwriters from Yorkshire, which is the north of the country, writing in the style of Black American artists And
That's
then,
a very good point, Samar. I don't want to cut you off, but I want to build on it real quick while it's in my mind. If you listen,
we're going to talk about Rod Temperton, but go on, yes.
Yes, I was exactly just where I was leading. If you listen to Rod Temperton's lyrics,
yes,
Rod Temperton's lyrics are written, a lot of them, for the songs that he wrote in that late 70s, early 80s period. The lyrics are based in what would be called jive,
right?
Which is basically the way that Black Americans talk.
Right.
So if you listen to like songs like "Ain't No Half Steppin'" or "Super Soul Sister," things like that. "We Gonna Ride the Boogie."
Yes,
that's a gentleman from Cleethorpes, England, writing those things.
Have you ever been to Cleethorpes?
I have never.
If you ever went to Cleethorpes, you would realize it's the least soulful place in the world. Right? So it's so fascinating to me that you get this, because what's happened is like the music has traveled around the world. You've had the creation of Black American music that has traveled around the world, where white musicians and songwriters have then kind of repurposed it and refigured it, and then it's gone back to Black American artists who have then sung it. And I think that's just, Stevie says music is a world within itself, right? It's a language we all understand. And it's the universality of Black American music and how, the Jacksons then record a song written by a white musician from Britain. And it's almost one of the definitive songs of Black American music. It's quite incredible. And again, the same happens with Rod Temperton. Like, it's not just the songs he writes for Michael. It's like, the songs he writes for George Benson and other Black artists. Like, they become definitive almost of a time and an era, but also they're songs that we quintessentially recognize as Black American songs, right?
Someone, can I ask you a question, please?
Of course you can.
Did Mick Jackson's version of "Blame It on the Boogie," as he says it, get any significant radio play in the UK?
Absolutely not. No. Not that I know. But I tell you something. They did do a documentary. There was a Channel 4 TV documentary on it a few years ago, quite recently. I'm talking about probably within the last 10 years. So yeah, I mean, it didn't really get any kind of. I mean, no one plays that on the radio now. Let's put it that way.
I just checked. It charted at number 15 in the UK.
Right. But that was back in the 70s?
Yeah.
And has never been seen since?
Yes.
The Jacksons version charted at 15, right?
In the UK, at number 8. Yeah, they did better than his.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, another interesting tidbit about the song was that the song was initially written with Stevie Wonder in mind.
That's incredible, right?
That I did not know.
Can you hear that? That's when I heard that. I don't know if I can hear it. Can you hear Stevie Wonder singing that song, or can you hear it written in the style of Stevie Wonder?
I think it's just way too up tempo for Stevie, and it's too up tempo, too much of a dance track for Stevie at that point in Stevie's career. I think maybe I'm wrong.
I can hear Stevie singing the Jackson's version. The Mick Jackson version sounds like Leo Sayer, "You Make Me Feel Like Dancing."
Yes.
Which is a great song. Which is a great song.
It is absolutely.
But I can hear Stevie singing the Jackson's version. Now, what's funny about that is that Greg Fillinganes, when he talks about arranging "Blame It on the Boogie," he said he sat with it and he asked himself, "What would Stevie do?" And that's how you get the descending bass line. Dun 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 dun.
Dun, dun, yep.
So Stevie's all over Stevie's footprint, his fingerprint is all over this thing.
Absolutely.
Wow,
Absolutely. Yeah. And so to your point, Summer, this is actually still a very popular song in the Black community. You put this song on and it may sound dated, but I mean, this song, it's still very popular when it's played.
Well, we say that. You say it sounds dated, but listen to something like "Show You the Way to Go" and then listen to "Blame It on the Boogie." "Blame It on the Boogie" sounds light years ahead. Not just from the kind of genre of the track, but just from the production and the kind of quality of the recording sounds like a whole new world. And there's only like a 2-year difference between those songs.
That's true. Very true. Very true. And this song was also used for a Dr. Pepper radio ad that the brothers did for Dr. Pepper. So this song was a great way to kick off the album. And so that then leads us to the second track.
1 second, Shawn. Can we just, before we leave "Blame It on the Boogie"?
Yes, sir.
There's also the brilliant music video, which again,
yes,
which again, I think it propels the Jacksons further. And you notice now they're not wearing suits and bow ties. And I mean, I think Jackie is wearing a blazer or something, but it's a much younger image. And
Yeah, Jackie's wearing a blazer with no shirt.
there you go. It's a much younger, cooler, hipper image that they're projecting at this stage. And it's also got a bit of an Earth, Wind and Fire feel to it, with the kind of echoes, like the visual echoes on the screen. Even that is done in a much neater way than the Earth, Wind and Fire video. So that's something to take into account, because again, if you look at that and you compare it to something like one of the videos or one of the live performances from one of the previous albums, they look like 10 years younger by this stage.
Yes, and then also, speaking of their fashion sense in that video, Michael is wearing the brown sweater with a star on it, which the story I've heard is that sweater had been around for a few years, and Michael was known for just wearing the same thing over and over again. And I believe there is a picture of maybe 2-3 years prior,
Yes,
and he was wearing that sweater, and so that sweater was pretty young for him to be wearing at that time. So I think it's pretty funny that you bring that up. Jay, I think you were getting ready to jump in to confirm.
yes, I remember seeing that picture. It's him and LaToya. I think they was in 1974, 75. So yeah, he was a young dude when he in that picture, and then for him to do it again at age 20 in the video.
Still wearing that same sweater.
I remember
Yes.
seeing the clip of that video in Moonwalker. And that was when I went, wait a minute, I've never heard this song before. And I was really, really, really young. And that video is still, to this day, as low budget as you may think it is now, it is still amazing.
And when they did that song live, one of the great things I loved about it, and one of the things that always kind of was frustrating for me with the brothers, was that they gave Randy an opportunity to kind of work it out on the keyboard. And it was never long enough. And that's one of the things that there's a live performance of that. I think that's over in the UK, and just Randy's performance. Randy had an opportunity just to kind of, jam a little bit on it. And anytime Randy is able to jam, whether it's on the congas or the keyboards, I always want more. And so that's one of the things that I love about the live performance of this song.
I can't wait to get to Push Me Away. I really can't.
Okay, so then let's move on to to one of my favorite songs, "Push Me Away." Second song on the album. Again, I believe this is going to be the first time that we hear MJ's falsetto recorded, and then again, this is Michael as an adult, but this is going to be his first time really projecting that falsetto.
Yeah.
And for me, what I love about this song is that on any Michael Jackson song, there's going to be a point where Michael is just going to cut loose, right? He's going to just give it to you. And it's typically at the end where he's just going to, it's time to just let go. I don't think he does that on this song. I think he floats vocally over this song, and he never allows himself to just, at the end, he almost wants to, but he doesn't. And I believe that's the only time you really hear that or hear him do that.
That is a great observation, Shawn. Okay. When we're talking about Michael Jackson vocal performances, this song is what I point people to many times, because his vocal performance here, his control,
Yep,
along with the emotion, because that's something, like you said, most people, when most vocalists want to show emotion, that's when they start riffing and ad-libbing and shouting and things like that. And Michael also having done that. But here, he's able to give you the emotion with supreme vocal control.
yes.
And like you said, when he hits that falsetto, oh my God. It's like an instrument in and of itself. It's like another string instrument. It's absolutely gorgeous. If anybody should ever, and I've heard some people doubt Michael's abilities as a singer, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But if there's ever any doubt about how upper echelon of a vocalist Michael Jackson is, this song is the one to quiet any of that criticism.
It just, when you get to that point where it says, "Don't you know?" Okay, let me get it right. These, don't you know? These can be the real. Like, that's about the most that you get when he gets that reel, right? And he wants to, I feel like he wants to take that reel and just really go deep down, but he controls himself. He like, the reel. Then he comes right back. You and me. And it's just like he just floats through the entire song. So Score, I 100%, 1000% agree with you that he's under control. And this is a song where, again, Michael's only 19, 20, and he has such command of his voice, and he doesn't get in the way of the orchestration. Everything just is just perfect about this song.
The lyric is fantastic. I mean, because if we want to, let's be real, the majority of these lyrics, we can kind of recognize they come from Michael's pen.
Yes.
This is the first time, and so Blaming on the Boogie was Mick Jackson and his friends. So this is Push Me Away is the first time that the brothers really get to step out, not only with their writing, but their production as well. Okay. So between the lyric, the vocal, and the string arrangement by Claire Fisher. So a lot of Prince fans rave about Claire Fisher's work with Prince, but we hear it all the way back in 1978 on this song here.
Absolutely.
What's really fascinating about all of this is that this is a period where Michael is really prolific. So whereas later on in his career, when he's releasing one album every 5 years, he doesn't have the time to record take after take after take after take. So when you say his vocals are supreme at this point, I can't imagine how many takes he would have been able to afford. He would have had the time to afford in order to record the vocal that we hear on the record. He's not able to work on this for 5 years like he is on the songs later on in his career. So it's like he has to be great from the get-go, basically. And that's just kind of, just adds to how brilliant this period is for him as a creative talent.
Has anybody ever felt that this song may be maybe a part to the Blues Away? Because lyrically, it kind of feels like a response to it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, massively. And I think, like I said about Blues Away earlier, is like that's a theme that runs throughout his career. It's
Absolutely.
It's about singing about heartbreak, but singing it beautifully, which is what he does. I mean, Remember the Time is like an up-tempo dance. I was at I was at a party last week. They played Remember the Time on the dance floor. Remember the Time's about heartbreak.
Yes.
And this is a song which is sung so beautifully and so melodiously, but ultimately is about having your heart broken. And it's like a very much an MJ tradition, I think, that becomes greater as we go down his career.
For sure.
One thing I wanted to say, Shawn, which we didn't really speak about, which I know you wanted to talk about, was whether it was a concept album. And we were talking about their image from Blame It on the Boogie and about what the cover looked like, the cover design, and how cool they looked on the cover as compared to earlier albums and earlier covers. And again, the image that runs through the album, the live performances, the videos that we see of them. And something that I really wanted to mention, actually, because this is the first time we see the peacock being introduced as the Jackson emblem. And I think there's a quote where Michael talks about the significance of why they choose the peacock and what that represents. And I wonder if that has much to do with their Jehovah's Witness upbringing, about, recognizing their responsibility as musicians, not just to be profligate with their talent, but also to use it as a uniting force. And there was something that had been on my mind quite a bit, because something that I've always connected Michael to, and I'm sure some of you might know, I'm sure you'll know the advert, but it's the Coca-Cola advert. I'd like to teach the world to sing. Do you remember that advert?
Yeah.
That TV advert?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do wonder what kind of an effect that advert, because the song was huge and it was everywhere. And it's one of the most famous advertising campaigns in American history, but in TV history. So everyone would have seen that. And I wonder what kind of an effect that would have had on Michael around the time when it was televised, or when the advert was going out, because the video, some of the scenes from that video, from the advert, we see in Michael Jackson videos later on. I think Heal the World, we have that kind of almost like the choir of children holding up little candles, which is very similar to what happens in the Coca-Cola commercial. All the colors of the world are singing on this little mountain, and there's all children and whatnot, and they're all singing, and the camera pulls back from them, And that's very much what happens in the Heal the World.
Can you feel
Summer, I think we see that imagery again in the Triumph video, aka Can You Feel It?
Exactly.
Video.
Yes, the Can You Feel It video with I think Tito's kids are in that video. Exactly that. And again, that the Can You Feel It video has the peacock feather kind of littered throughout. So that imagery and those visuals, whether it's a concept album, I don't know, but whether the Jackson's project from this point onwards becomes a concept as opposed to just this one album. They are trying, and as turns out later on the Triumph album, when they release Can You Feel It, they are trying to send out I don't want to say political message because it's not kind of really partisan in that sense, but it's a unifying message that they're trying to send out through their music, which is incredibly admirable because they don't have to do that, but they do.
A social message, I say.
Exactly that, yes. And again, obviously, that becomes something that Michael develops on, as does Janet as well during her career. They recognize their responsibility as major artists on a global scale, not to be kind of irresponsible with their image and the message that they're sending out.
Well, and I would say that this is a concept album in a sense, because I think they are dual messages here, where you start the album off with a song like Blame It On The Boogie, which is up-tempo dance number, which is what they're known for, which is what they love to do, right? And then you come with Push Me Away, a deeply personal song, right? That comes from deep inside of Michael. And then you transition from Push Me Away to Things I Do For You. And there you have some more deeply personal lyrics. And I think for the first time, we hear what appears to be anger, confusion, and mistrust in a bluesy feel type song. And so because we can transition over to, but before we transition over to Things I Do For You, again, Push Me Away, you have yet another vocal ad lib or vocal, some lyrics that Michael references later on. And it's the Don't You Know, right? The Don't You Know. You hear that in Centipede, Reeby's song that Michael wrote. And then you'll hear that in his own song, Leave Me Alone. So again, you're going to hear this throughout this entire album, where things that you got used to hearing Michael do in the 80s and the 90s, it all started with Destiny. So with that being said, again, now you transition to Things I Do For You, which is a time where, you hear, for the first time, I think you hear what Michael would complain about for the rest of his career, people with hands in his pocket. He wished they would stop it. They have a lot of nerve, right? So what do you guys think about Things I Do For You?
I think this is exactly as you say. It's one of the first times it's what I used to refer to as the prophecies of Michael Jackson, right? Because yes, he's talking about business dealings. He's talking about people not respecting him, not listening to the artist. He talks about, I took my problems to the doctor, things that show up later on in his career, right? Eerily prophetic in the lyrics. And again, when he performs it live, you get no sense of what the song is about, because it's such a brilliant dance production that it's kind of almost disconnected from actually the lyrical content of the song. But again, I think in hindsight, it's one of those songs that gets better the more time we have away from it, because you listen back to it and you think, oh my goodness, this guy was literally seeing what was happening to him 20 years later.
I mean, when you talk about concept, this is where the concept really crystallizes. I don't think it was intentional, but it happened anyway. So basically, this album is a therapy session for a young Michael Jackson, a young adult Michael Jackson. So he's dealing with all kinds of pressures. He's dealing with romantic rejection and Push Me Away, which, good point, is counterpart to Blues Away. But here, Michael is talking directly to us about real life issues, not something that he heard about or not something that he'd seen in a TV show or a movie. These are real life things happening to him in real time. Mm-hmm. The lyrics, when you strip away the funkiness, because it's a funky song, and Michael was attached to the song personally because he performed it until 1988.
Yep.
It's performed on the Bad Tour.
Yep.
So Michael had vested interest in this song. I don't know if was it a single? Does anyone know?
It was considered to be a single, but then didn't happen.
They performed it whenever they were on television.
Yep.
So this song was earmarked for the public to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But he says, again, the lyrical sharpness here. He says, "Am I in a bad situation? People take me to the extreme. They use rejection, so I need protection to keep my equity."
Yeah.
Coming from a 19, 20-year-old, that's pretty deep, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, these are the prophecies of Michael Jackson. This is a guy, like you say, he's living through it then, but 20 years later, what's happening to him and what's happening in his life. It's also remarkable because what happens later as a solo artist, only a couple of years later, probably the next year actually, when he works on the Off the Wall album, I think he only writes 2 songs on that. And there's a lot of commentary about Michael Jackson only became Michael Jackson because of Quincy Jones. When you
don't get me started on that.
No.
Don't get me started on that song.
This is exactly.
That's a pet peeve of mine, man.
Mine too.
No,
Mine too.
So this is why I say Destiny is actually like really the beginning of the magical era of Michael Jackson, because you begin to recognize him and realize what a brilliant songwriter he is. And the Quincy era, up until I suppose we get to the Bad album where he writes most of the songs. Obviously, it's a brilliant period for him. Obviously, it's a super successful period for him. But I think he's stunted during that period as a songwriter. I think most of his great songwriting actually happens with the Jacksons up until he breaks free from Quincy and he's able to then go on to do work on Dangerous in History.
Agreed.
But I think here is like where you get to really see, God, what talent this guy had. Really, what incredible talent he had.
In ways, this album feels like the prologue to history.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very much.
It's
yes.
It's like Scorp said, it's a therapy session, and then you see from age 20, and then several years later down the line, age 36, Michael. Same themes, the same kind of even anger at times too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know Marlon in an interview said that this song was inspired by their mother, Catherine's giving nature and not getting the kindness back in return. And so we all know Michael's affection for his mother. And so that makes a lot of sense. I think she had a big influence on this song as well.
Joe Jackson said one time on his website, I believe, the website is no more, but Joe had a page for each family member. And he said, and I think he meant it in the inverse way, but he said that Catherine reminds him so much of Michael because of her sensitivity and her giving nature. So if Michael wrote this song as a reflection of his mother's experience, then it's fitting, I would think.
Absolutely. And so then that song segues into the massive hit off the album, Shake Your Body Down to the Ground. And that was released on February 12, 1979. It reached number 7 on the charts in 1979. And I believe it got all the way up to number 3 on the R&B charts. And so the interesting thing about this song is I think there is a throwback to the Gamble and Huff years that the brothers had with Philly International. But I would also say like my favorite version of this song is the John Luongo disco remix. I heard it one time on the radio, and it was back in the day where you had to, you hear a song on the radio and you had to wait to hear it again so you could record it. I waited for weeks to hear that thing again, and to this day, it's still my favorite.
You had your tape on record and pause.
Yes, I was waiting for that one. I'm sure I got it somewhere. It's at my mother's house somewhere. But I mean, that's my favorite version. So gentlemen, did you pick up on the Gamble and Huff connection? And then also there's a Marvin Gaye connection to this song too, right?
Absolutely. So as far as the Gamble and Huff connection, Randy Jackson, in his appearance on Questlove Supreme podcast, he admitted that Shake Your Body Down to the Ground started as kind of a riff or a variation of Get Down, Get Funky, Get Loose by Teddy Pendergrass. The bass line from Get Down, Get Funky, Get Loose by Teddy Pendergrass is the inspiration for the bass line for Shake Your Body Down to the Ground. So when you listen to them back to back, you hear it right away. And as far as Marvin Gaye, if you listen to the full version of Got to Give It Up, which was released in 1977, it was released as side D on the double album. I believe it was Marvin Gaye Live.
Yes.
Okay.
Live at the Palladium.
Okay. Thank you. Live at the Palladium. So Got to Give It Up spans the entire side. It's about 11, 12 minutes. And once you get deep into it, you hear Marvin sing, "Let's dance, let's shout. Getting funky is what it's all about."
Yeah. And he goes on, doesn't he?
What you will, guys.
I'm not going to sing it. Sean, you can sing it for me. But he goes on. He goes on, doesn't he? Non-stop express.
Yes.
And it carries on. And yes. And what's really interesting about this, because I've made a few notes about this before, obviously recording this today, it's like that Marvin Gaye song, I think, is responsible for at least three different, it shows up in three different Michael Jackson songs, I think.
Yes, Summer, yes.
It definitely shows up in this. It definitely shows up in Don't Stop Till You Get Enough with the falsetto that runs through the track.
Mm-hmm.
But it also shows up in, so some of the ad-libs from the Marvin Gaye song show up on the ad-libs on Get On The Floor, which are, let me see, I can't remember the ones from Get On The Floor. What is it? It's,
get up, won't you go and get down? Get up,
get down. Get up. And that's from the Marvin Gaye song as well.
Yes.
And what's really fascinating about that is that one Marvin Gaye song basically helps create these three Michael Jackson or Jackson-related songs. But that's not the first time that happens. Oh, that is the first time it happens, but it's not the only time it happens because... And I talk about this quite a lot on my social media about the Tears for Fears song, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and how that basically creates three Michael Jackson songs. Mm-hmm. Again, you'll probably need to get playback of the Tears for Fears song, but the rhythm arrangement of that and the drums and the structure of the song is basically identical to The Way You Make Me Feel. The way the drums build up, it's almost as if it's sampled from the Tears for Fears song. And then also some of the keyboards from the same Tears for Fears song show up in Smooth Criminal. So the dun, dun, show up in Smooth Criminal, which is literally taken from the Tears for Fears song. And then some of it also shows up in Leave Me Alone. So three songs on the Bad album basically have some sort of etymology from the Tears for Fears song, I believe. But definitely the rhythm track is definitely taken or inspired by the Tears for Fears song. So it's not the first time it happens where one song helps create three other Michael Jackson songs, which is really interesting. It's like it's not, I mean, I'm sure lots of other artists are inspired by other artists' work, but it's just it's like a fascinating thing that shows up in MJ's music.
And I think what it does is it shows how Michael was truly a student of music and the student of artistry. And I think it was his way of showing reverence to those that he admired.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. So and that's what I always appreciated about him. And I appreciate any artist that, they don't mind showing that reverence because there's only so many notes, right?
Of course.
And so there's always going to be some sort of connection, right? So the one that I'm always reminded of is that I think Maceo Parker was talking about how James Brown came up with Cold Sweat. And basically Cold Sweat is Miles Davis's So What, but they sped it up quite a bit and they changed, they put it on they put it on the one, right? And so when he said that, I went back and listened to it, and that's exactly what it is. And so it was James Brown showing reverence to Miles Davis, and this is no different. And Michael, he's done that throughout his career musically, and even when he, amassed the music catalog, he made sure that he went and recorded Come Together because he knew the connection of Chuck Berry and what Chuck Berry had to go through in order to get credit for parts of that song. So I really do appreciate that. And then there's the Bobby Timmons connection. I think Randy talked about that on the Questlove podcast, right, Scorp?
Not sure. I think that you brought that to my attention, actually.
Yes, there is a jazz song, and I'm drawing a blank on it right now. I should know this. But yes, if you go back, and I'll look it up in a second here. But there was, Randy talked about how the groove came from a jazz artist by the name of Bobby Timmons. And if you listen you can hear it. And I'm going to look this up in a second here, and I'll give you the name. But yeah, Randy did talk about how that groove from Shake Your Body came from that song.
Well, yeah, in terms of talking about reverence and kind of paying tribute and honoring what went before, there's a Prince song called Laveau, which is again, built around Shake Your Body Down to the Ground, which he released, I think it's on his 2010 album.
Yes.
And, it sounds very similar to Shake Your Body. And around that time on the tour, Prince was performing Shake Your Body on as a live song. He wasn't, what I always loved about Prince, whenever he covered Michael live on stage, he never sang the vocal. It would always be his backing vocalist who would sing the vocals. So I just thought that was quite interesting when you were talking about like paying reverence to what has gone before, that the Prince song Laveau is almost a tribute to Shake Your Body Down to the Ground.
Shawn, I took the time to let the computers pute, as we say on my show. And the song that I think we're referencing by Bobby Timmons is called A Little Busy.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Yes. So, yeah, ready to talk about how, so for those of you who are listening, go and pull up Bobby Timmons a little late and listen to that, and then listen to Shake Your Body. And then you can see, you can hear the connection. But the other thing about this is Michael and Randy. And I've said this before. I think that Michael, when he was with Randy, when he performed with Randy, when he wrote with Randy, there was a different energy.
Magic.
Magic. Absolutely. That's the word. And you hear it right here. I think they were.
Can I tell you my really cool Randy Jackson story?
Absolutely.
Randy Jackson and Michael Jackson story. So I was at one of the Janet Jackson shows last year at the O2, and word had got round that, apparently like Randy is like working on the production. So he works where the production desk is, or the huge sound studio desk is, which is right on the middle of the floor at the O2. He was just walking around. And because, no one seemed to recognize him, he had a hat on, sunglasses, and he was just able to walk around freely. Me being me, I was like, no, I'm going to find him and I'm going to get my picture taken with him. I'm going to chat to him. So me and some friends, we went over where the production area was, and we saw him. We saw Randy. It's behind this kind of gated area. So we waved at him, and he actually came down. It was like, oh my God, this is Randy Jackson. I don't know what his role is with Janet. I think, is he managing Janet at the moment? I can't remember, but
he's on the management team in some capacity, yes.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so he came over and just obviously he said, oh, it's really nice to meet you. Come and get some photos. And I said to him something that I'd always wanted to ask. No one's ever asked him. And it's always been on my mind. And it actually is connected with him and Michael and their songwriting. And it was about, and I said to him, there's something I've always wanted to ask you, Randy. He said, what is it? Go and hit me. And I said, during the song Lovely One, the Jackson song Lovely One, there's that horn arrangement, there's that horn section, and I'm going to sing it now, and it goes and I said to him, now, I know that your brother Michael was a massive Benny Hill fan. You guys ever watch Benny Hill? Did you watch Benny Hill in America?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So you know the theme tune, Yakety Sax?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I said to Randy, I said, see, I know Michael was a massive Benny Hill fan, and that horn section in Lovely One sounds almost identical to Yakety Sax. He stopped me, he said, hold on a second. Michael wasn't the only Benny Hill fan in the family. We were all Benny Hill fans.
Oh, wow.
Which was really cool. And I said to him, come on, tell me. You can tell me, it's off the record. I was joking. I said, it's off the record. You can tell me. Was that inspired by the Benny Hill song? He laughed about it. And he said, he didn't say yes or no. And he looked up in the sky and he said, you know what it could have been? But he basically was trying to say no. But I just found it really fascinating. I'm sure it is actually inspired by the Benny Hill song, but that's my little Randy Jackson story. But yeah, they had an incredible partnership. I also did say to him that one of my favorite Jackson songs was his version of One More Chance, which is on the Victory album.
Yes.
Because Janet records it later, but his version is one of the most beautiful songs that any of the Jackson members has recorded.
Agreed.
I agree 1,000%. But yeah, but Michael and Randy and Scorp, you had and I think Summer, you touched on it. Like there was something between those two that just was undeniable. For me, the sad part about this is that they never really explored it the way they should have the remainder of their career. I would have loved to have had a Michael and Randy album, right, where Michael is allowing Randy to produce him, and they write together. Because you see with Shake Your Body Down to the Ground, anything that they did together was phenomenal, was just an outstanding song. And so we were able to see it here on Shake Your Body.
While I agree with you, Shawn, I think there's a reason for that couldn't be.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. Yes, they're still siblings, and I understand. I understand that 100%.
Michael's independence was at stake.
Yeah.
So anything that he did, and we saw this even after Off the Wall, anything that Michael did that was successful, the family would kind of come in and get a piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we didn't have an Off the Wall tour. That's why we didn't have a Thriller tour.
Yeah.
We got Jackson's tours instead.
Yes.
So in the brothers' mind, anything Michael did was just an offshoot of the Jacksons.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, they claimed it as well. It was an independence thing is what it was. Now, before we move off of this, I do want to point out that Shake Your Body Down to the Ground is not your average disco, quote unquote, disco record. It is the rhythm of Shake Your Body Down to the Ground is very unorthodox. So when you strip it down to just rhythm, you're not getting four on the floor. That's what the John Luongo remix that you referenced earlier, that's what it does. The John Luongo remix kind of straightens it out and gets into a four on the floor thing. Boom, boom,
Mm-hmm.
boom, boom, that disco tempo, that disco pulse. But on its own, it's kind of like a tumbling kind of zoom da da doom da doom boom ba doom ba doom doom da ba doom. And the drum part played by studio veteran Ed Green. Ed Green played Barry White. He played with Marvin Gaye on the Let's Get It On album. So Ed Green's studio is 3 overdubs.
Yes.
So kick and snare, hi-hat, and then toms. 3 separate parts.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, that's how Jonathan Sugarfoot Moffett got the job as the Jacksons drummer, a job he kept until Michael's death.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he did some performances with the Jacksons even after Michael passed. He was able to play Shake Your Body in one go, whereas that was thought to be impossible. So Shake Your Body was interesting in more ways than just it being the big hit on Destiny.
Yeah. And then also we were able to hear when it was released on, was it the Michael Jackson Ultimate Collection, just how competitive they were during that time, where at the end of was it the demo of Shake Your Body?
Yes.
It was the demo of Shake Your Body where you hear Jackie saying, I want the Bee Gees to hear this shit, right?
Yeah.
Because the Bee Gees were, the top group at the time. And so that's who everybody was competing with. And so this was their answer, so to speak, to Saturday Night Fever, right?
Yeah. I mean, the Bee Gees, prior to Thriller becoming the best-selling album of all time, the Bee Gees' Saturday Night Fever held that title.
Yeah. And it goes back to like Black American music, because that's basically what they were recording. But they were white guys recording Black American music. And it's really interesting that I think it's Jackie who references them on the end of the Shake Your Body demo. And those demos are so special, like not just the Jacksons ones, but the ones we hear later on the Off the Wall album and then the Thriller album.
Yeah.
And it's something that, Chris Martin, the lead singer of Coldplay, he references specifically Michael's work with Randy Jackson on those demos when they were writing their album, Viva La Vida or Death and All His Friends. When they were writing that album, they were heavily influenced by Michael's demos that he was recording.
Really?
With Randy and Janet, yeah.
Wow.
Which is really interesting.
Wow.
Before we finish on Shake Your Body, just again, because I think the music is one thing, but the image is also really important, because what's happening here is I think there's the American Bandstand performance that shows up a lot on social media at the moment. And just compare that American Bandstand, I think it's American Bandstand when they're all wearing blue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just compare that performance to any prior Jackson family performance and how now they look like they're kind of living in the future. They're like, they suddenly look like young, fit, sexy, attractive men. As adults, as opposed to guys playing dress up as adults. Do you know what I mean? Guys wearing suits and bow ties. And now they suddenly look like a completely different outfit, completely fresh, completely new, and like almost like a new band.
Absolutely. And I think that's owing in part to Randy, joining the group, and the dynamic that he brings. Whereas before you just had the Jermaine and Tito anchor. They were bookends, and then they operated in between those two. But now you had Randy moving around with the guitar, and so I think it allowed them to again look more sleek, look more like they were futuristic. They were breaking out of that Jackson 5 mold.
Exactly that. Mm-hmm.
So I agree. I agree. I 1000% agree.
And you talked about ad-lib, Shawn. On this song, we get a Michael ad-lib that would reappear in the future, taking over.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, Destiny really lays the foundation for everything that you hear and you come to love about Michael. Good catch, man. Good catch.
I wanted to bring up the similarities between Cool, because Got to Give It Up not just only gave birth to 3 Jackson songs, it gave birth to a Prince song, another Prince song, The Time's Cool. Because if you hear it, it sounds so much similar to Got to Give It Up and Shake Your Body to the Ground. Has anybody ever noticed that also?
I think that's why Prince was able to play it or sing Shake Your Body Down to the Ground to the groove of Shake
exactly.
Your Body.
Yeah.
To sing Cool.
Yes.
Yes. That's why it makes sense when you hear it. Cool is a derivative of Shake Your Body Down to the Ground.
For sure.
Yeah. And also, again, when we're talking about that Marvin Gaye song kind of creating these 3 MJ songs, when Michael performed Shake Your Body live on the Bad Tour, on the first leg of the Bad Tour, he then sings some of the, not the verses, but some of the chorus of Don't Stop Till You Get Enough towards the end of Shake Your Body Down to the Ground.
He does.
So it's clear that they are related. They are family, those songs.
Yeah. All right. So now we'll flip it over to side B and the title track, Destiny. So again, I'm beginning to notice when you listen to this album, a trend where you get an up-tempo song, then you get a song that's deeply personal. So we saw that on side 1 with Blame It On The Boogie, Push Me Away, Things I Do For You, Shake Your Body. And now you're coming to Destiny. Again, another song with some deeply personal lyrics, a folksy kind of country sound, similar to what they talked about when they first started off. They would sit around with their mother, Catherine, Miss Jackson, and sing country and Western songs. So Destiny kind of falls right into that vein. So guys, what do you think about Destiny?
It's interesting because Destiny, you get that country and Western thing at the beginning. And with you hear the lap steel guitar in places around this song. At this point, country music and just the culture around it was starting to break into the mainstream in America. So you had movies like Smokey and the Bandit, Convoy, things like that. And then later we would have Urban Cowboy with John Travolta. So the
TV show. Yeah, the TV show Hee Haw.
Yes, Hee Haw. Hee Haw was huge at that point in time. So Destiny, those nods to country music were appropriate at the time.
And I also find it interesting that you have that folksy kind of country guitar at the beginning, but at the end you get this blazing guitar solo.
Yeah, I think this is basically where the Jacksons actually originate, right? So they don't go through the gospel church like a lot of kind of groups or black R&B groups did, like back in those days. They, their dad was a blues guitarist, their mum loved country music. Tito was a blues guitarist, and up until his death, he was playing blues shows he was traveling around the world playing blues music. So this is really where the Jacksons, their ground, basically, their comfort zone, where they should have, the kind of place where they own. I really love this song. I think it's an incredible song, and it's again, it just fills me with a bit of tragedy because it's like, again, at this stage, these guys are millionaires. They're living in Havenhurst. They're like living in splendor at this stage, and they're only 20 years old. And they're talking about the stuff they're talking about in the song about, tasting the good life, I've tasted a rich life. It's not for me. Like, we want to live humble, simple lives, although we are kind of having to live it basically within Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
And I think for fans, and I think there was a truth to that for Michael, that he for all the riches that he had, he was always wanting to live as humble a life as possible. He talks about it. That's all he ever used to talk about was, I want to live as humble as a child, as humble as a newborn baby, he says in interviews. And there's something really beautiful about the sentiment, but also quite tragic because he can't. It's this kind of weird situation that he's in where he wants to live the most simple, basic life, but he also has this huge circus that he is kind of in the center of. And it's this kind of tragedy that Michael Jackson fans have to kind of always deal with, I think.
Some of you make your points here. Let's tie in Catherine. Okay, you said that the country western thing is kind of where they come from, and you're right about that. So the Jackson 5 came to be because Catherine used to gather the family around the piano and sing her favorite country and western songs. That is where she noticed the harmony between the three oldest boys, Jackie, Jermaine, and Tito. And she told Joe about that harmony that she heard from them singing, as a family. So you're absolutely right in that, the country and western music is pivotal to the Jackson story. But also, and you're talking about Michael wanting to live humbly and this song being a rejection of material wealth as a source of happiness, because that's what this song is about. Michael would often sleep on the floor well into his adult years. He usually did not sleep on his own bed. He usually slept on the floor. Jean Carn, who was one of the Philly International artists at the same time that the Jacksons were there, she was also on the Questlove Supreme podcast, and she talked about how she served as a vocal coach to the brothers. Not only the brothers, but anybody recording with Philly International at that time. And she talked about Michael's problems with sleeping even back then. So she said that she would let Michael come into her room during the day to get a nap, and he would sleep on the floor, and that shocked her. And he preferred to sleep on the floor. So your point about him wanting to live humbly, you can see that in the way he carried himself at times.
I think Quincy also speaks about that. Obviously, when they were recording Thriller, they had a timeline where they basically had to live in the studio, but he would sleep on the studio floor while they were recording Thriller.
Yeah. So then that takes us to the next song, another deeply personal song, Bless His Soul. And one of the things that I noticed about this one is, I think this one really, of all the songs on this album, I think this is really Michael really opening himself up, and it's revealing. It's one of the most revealing and profound songs in his catalog. And in this song, there's a couple things that stands out. Again, he uses the word doggone in this song, and again, that's a recurring lyric. You hear it in The Girl Is Mine. You hear it in Just Good Friends, right? And then also what stands out for me in this song is the way that he sings the word dangerous. Sounds very similar to the way he sings Dangerous in 1991. Know if anyone else picked that up.
I definitely picked it up. It's kind of hard, kind of hard to ignore. Yeah. This song here, I think stylistically, it's less R&B and more of the AOR style of music that was popular at this time. So AOR stands for album-oriented or adult-oriented radio, but it's known today retroactively as yacht rock. And it was also around this time, you'll notice that Michael did some collaboration with Kenny Loggins, another artist known for quote-unquote yacht rock. But this song, you're right, he kind of just opens the door to his closet of his feelings, and it's sad to listen to, but yet his command of writing and his command of delivery is interesting and astounding to witness.
And I also think that it's his way of saying, listen, you're only going to get one Michael Jackson, right? Take good care of him. And we know the world did not do that. So it's one of probably the most profound songs that he has ever written, where he, again, opens up his heart and his soul. And he knows, and he says it, the life you're leading is dangerous, right? It's so just ironic because some of the choices that he made later on in his life, he kind of knew that, but still he couldn't avoid.
Well, he seemed to also have a self-destructive thing about him as well. But again, like you say, some of the lyrics with stuff that we learned later, probably even past his own passing. I remember, I think Paris Jackson had posted something about his frame of mind or his state of mind. And one of the things she mentioned about Michael was he was a people pleaser.
Yeah.
And obviously the line in the song is, I try to please them.
Yes.
How far can this pleasing go?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Because he's always trying to satisfy so many, I was going to say people, but actually they're stakeholders. Everyone's a stakeholder in Michael Jackson's life, right? Like there's family, there's, there's an audience, there's a record label, there's these people, there's that people. There's very little space for Michael Jackson to exist as a human being.
It's interesting that he brings in Jackie, and I don't want to step on you, Summer. It's interesting that he brings in Jackie as a second voice.
Well, and the questions he asks him, like something. What does he say? He says,
"You just can't please the world and yourself."
Beautiful, beautiful, man.
You gotta start doing what's right for you, because life is being happy yourself.
Yeah, and the thing is, like that's one thing that separated him from his brothers, really, and tragically, I think, is the fact that all of them were still able to live their lives. Tito was able to get married, Jackie was able to get married, Randy, and Jermaine was already married. I mean, they were all able to live, I suppose, I don't want to say normal lives, but they were all able to live lives, get married, have children. What did Michael say? I'm married to my career, I'm married to my craft, I can't get married. I don't have space to get married. And obviously, years later he did, but that's what he said. He said, I can't do that right now. I'm married to my career. At that stage, he knew he was going stratospheric, and there were a lot of pressures on him that weren't necessarily on all of his brothers, I think.
To your point, Summer, there's a book by an audio engineer by the name of Bill Schnee. It's spelled Schnee, but it's pronounced Schnee. Bill Schnee recorded and engineered and mixed the Jackson's Live album from 1981. Schnee recalls a point in time during the mixing where they were under the gun for the deadline. The record had to be mixed or it wouldn't come out. And so he says, fellas, we're going to have to work over the weekend. And the brothers kind of paused and looked at each other and they said, well, we don't work on the weekends. And this kind of took Schnee aback. And he said, well, listen, we devote so much time to our career. We have families. We have children and wives. So we, dedicate the weekend especially to him. And he said once he heard that, it made complete sense. He was like, okay. So Michael said, I'll be here. I'll come.
Imagine that.
So
incredible.
It calls back to what Suzanne DePass said a few years ago when she said that when they were kids in Motown, the brothers would come in and do the vocals and stuff like that, and they would leave. But Michael would have to stay. And he had to sacrifice a lot more at times of his time, even at 19, 11 years old. So it was something that he had been dealing with for most of his life at that point. I think then he probably had had enough, or he was feeling the pressures of all of it and was expressing it finally.
Yeah.
Or maybe his ambition was just greater. That's also something that I conjure with. Maybe his ambition was just greater, and he could see things, for whatever reason, he could see things that they couldn't see.
Yeah.
But also, in hindsight, it wasn't good for him, I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think so either. I wish he had given himself more peace.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it is. I think if he had done that, it would have made a world of difference. And if people had given him more peace as well. I don't think Michael ever was really asking for sympathy. When he was writing certain songs, he always seemed to be asking for understanding.
Yeah.
More than
absolutely
than anything.
Good point.
I think that gets lost on when he has songwriting.
Yeah, you're right. And then it takes us to, because I want to make sure I get to the last song, because I think the last song on the album really kind of ties in with Bless His Soul. But All Night Dancing, this was another Michael and Randy song. And there's not much to this song other than I would say that this is, and Summer, I think you brought it up earlier about them not, coming through the church. But this song to me is all church, right? It's all, I feel like this is, influenced by any Black Baptist or Pentecostal church on Sunday mornings. Just the way that, the groove, even, and again, it probably is not intentional, but even when Michael talks about dancing with fire, to me, that evokes the whole biblical story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They was thrown into the fire and they sang and danced for the Lord. So this is, I think, Michael's first foray into gospel music, which we will hear later on with Man in the Mirror and Keep the Faith. And then you got that blazing rock guitar solo at the end. So I think for this song, I mean, there's not a whole heck of a lot other than I think that's my take on what I hear.
You're on point, Shawn. You're on point because if you notice, the song starts with a false start, and it's the Hammond B3 organ. So it's the church organ that starts off this song. So that lets us know where this song is coming from. So I think you're dead on.
It's not the first time. Well, it is the first time, but it happens again later on in Michael's career. Dangerous being the actual song I wanted to reference, which is, again, Dangerous, what is it, 1991, New Jack Swing record, dance track, but actually there's verses from the King James Bible throughout the whole song.
Yep.
I hadn't thought of the Destiny album as being a concept album, but here we are, exactly as you say, like lyrics about kind of dancing with fire, and Michael and I suppose the brothers weren't particularly removed from the Jehovah's Witness. They were very connected to their beliefs, and that shows up in their music. Again, it shows up again obviously in Triumph later on, but it was always in the music somewhere. Yeah. And fascinating that they set it they can set it to dance tracks as well, because you wouldn't imagine that. Like Man in the Mirror, for example, is the kind of gospel song that you would imagine, I guess, right? And Keep the Faith is a kind of more traditional gospel song, but Dangerous actually has literal verses from the King James Bible in it. It's like, it's not something that people would recognize immediately, I imagine, as being a biblical response or a biblical record.
I think Michael was fascinated by the traditional Black church. And I think this ultimately resulted in his later vocal approach, a vocal approach that a lot of people complain about, but I see as a natural evolution from this. If you listen to Michael's vocal approach on, say, a song like Scream, his phrasing is that of a Black preacher. I'm tired of injustice. I'm tired of the schemes. I'm tired of the confusion. And what does it mean? You know,
brilliant.
It's that same rhythm, you know what I mean? That same, kind of flow and cadence that you get from a Black preacher. I mean, you see it in the end of the Bad video. They're telling me you're doing wrong.
Doing wrong. Yes.
So I just think that you are 1,000% spot on in saying that the attention of this song comes from the Black church, and it's not it's a dance track, but it's not, again, the regular 4-on-the-floor disco. This is just straight praise break.
Yes, that's
so,
exactly what this is. You can put this song and take off the lyrics and put it in any church, Black church, and it would fit. It would absolutely fit.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, and as you guys were just talking, I pulled up the verse from the King James Bible, and the verse literally reads, "For the lips of a strange woman drop as a honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil. Her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword." I mean, it's almost verbatim what Michael puts in Dangerous. So again, it's his littering his own output with messages that he wants to communicate with his audience, And there's so much depth to Michael's songwriting that, again, like I said, I think for the early Quincy albums, he was slightly strangled in that sense, because we don't hear this level of autobiography in Off the Wall, for example. There are a couple of songs, obviously, that are on the album, but I think he's kind of strangled to a degree. And then when he's able to write, my goodness, the kind of depths he goes into. He's just a phenomenal songwriter. And again, it's another thing that really irritates me. Obviously, people say, oh, Quincy Jones created Michael, but actually Michael's songwriting outside of the Quincy years is so incredible and so profound and so kind of comparable with any other kind of songwriter of the time. And he doesn't get enough credit for that because he's so brilliant at other things. He's such a brilliant vocalist. He's such a brilliant performer. He's such a style icon. And people those are easier things to kind of hold on to and gravitate to.
He does not get his due as a songwriter.
Absolutely not.
At
absolutely.
all.
No.
I mean, if you ask the average person, they don't even know that he wrote so many of his own songs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think, once again, that gospel influence started right here on Destiny. So that takes us to the last track on this album. And I'm going to be very brutally honest when I say that this is probably the most important, revealing, and profound song in all of the Jacksons and Michael's catalog. And that's what you get for Being Polite. I think this song, for me, really speaks to who Michael was, what he was going through. It was also, I think, a prediction, and we've talked about this throughout this album, where Michael was prophetic, right? I think it all comes together in this song. And the one thing about this song, again, is that it's a Michael and Randy composition. And I said this when I first appeared on the MJCast. We were talking about this song. I think that this song is, I'm not sure if it was intentional, but the fact that it ends the album, it's the last thing that we hear before Don't Stop Till You Get Enough opens Off the Wall. And we see a more sophisticated Michael. Sophisticated in his look, sophisticated in his sound. And I always said that this song here, that's what you get for Being Polite, is Little Michael's swan song. It's Little Michael closing the door, or it's Michael closing the door on Little Michael. So that way it opens the door for the next Michael, the Michael that we know from Off the Wall and beyond. And so I think this is, in my opinion, all right. And when people who are listening to this, you can, debate me about it. It's okay. But I think this is the most important song in his catalog and his career.
Of his entire career?
In his entire career.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I remember when I think
this song. This is the one song. I'm sorry, Summer. This is the one song that brings me to tears when I hear it.
Wow! Oh, just
Because
unbelievable.
I can feel it when he says, "Don't you know he cries?
Yeah.
Don't you know he's scared?
Yeah.
He's doing this because he wants love.
Yeah.
Jack still cries day and night. Jack's not happy with his life. He want to do this. He want to do that. He want to be kind, but ends up flat.
Yes.
Like I feel that."
Mm-hmm.
And then the way that the song goes, it's like in a playful, a nursery rhyme, but it's just so powerful the way that he sings it that way. But then at the end, when it's like fading out, he's like, "Don't you know he cries?
Yeah.
Don't you know he's scared?" That's Michael telling you that he's crying, that he's scared.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You'd mentioned that Randy and Michael had written it. It takes me back to an earlier episode of the MJCast. For MJCast alumni and MJCast fans of long standing, there's an episode where Brian Lauren, there's an episode with him that I think it was.
I remember that one.
Jamin interviewed him.
I remember that one.
And he mentions that actually what you need to do is take that's what you get for being polite and compare it to a Rufus and Chaka Khan song called, really interestingly, it's called Destiny. And melodically and musically, it's almost identical. So when we talk about inspirations from the Marvin Gaye songs, again, look back at the Rufus and Chaka Khan song Destiny, and musically, it's almost identical to That's What You Get for Being Polite, even down to the kind of, the intro is almost identical. So musically, it's inspired by other stuff. But lyrically, I mean, my goodness, again, what was going on in this guy's life that every song was so heavy lyrically. Like there's not much respite other than probably Shake Your Body and Blame It on the Boogie on this album. Like the lyrical content is very heavy, really dark, and again, dark lyrics that show up later on in Michael's career. I'm concerned that people weren't listening to the lyrics.
They were not at all.
Because musically he was, it was... you think of this album, you think of Blame It on the Boogie and Shake Your Body Down to the Ground, two like high up-tempo dance tracks that are radio-friendly and people will love. And I suppose it does bring an audience to the album and then people will listen to this. But these are cries for help, these songs, I think.
Absolutely. And Summer, to your point about people not listening, I remember there was a Wax Poetics article about Destiny. And the writer goes on to say, all the lyrics on Destiny are about dancing. And I'm like, you didn't listen to the record.
Oh my goodness!
No, you did not.
That's terrible.
You didn't listen to the record. You took the record home, but you didn't listen to the record.
No.
So a lot of this subject matter that we're talking about flew completely over the general public's heads, and I think it's brilliant. I thought it was absolutely brilliant as a songwriter. Instead of saying, I'm scared, I'm lonely, I'm confused, that he puts it into this character of Jack, you know what I mean? So instead of bringing the attention instead of being just direct and plain about it and saying, hey, I'm lonely, I'm scared. No, let's look at this guy. I want to talk about this guy. His name is Jack, and he's got all this stuff going on inside of him, eating up the pride in him that makes him buy things for the girls. That's what you get for being polite. Let's talk about that line, the title of this song. That's what you get for being polite. Because they say, nice guys finish last. And we've seen that theme in Michael's life where he's tried to do good things for people and for the world. And it gets misinterpreted, misconstrued, and he ends up being the bad guy. So just that title and that line is eerily and sadly prophetic.
And the one thing that people have always remarked about the Jacksons was that all of the tabloid fodder, all of that, they always talked about how polite they were as individuals. No matter who you talk to in the industry, they always talked about how they were very polite, very humble. And so that's an interesting choice of word to use in that song.
Another phrase, cliche, no good deed goes unpunished.
Absolutely.
That could be that could have been the title for this song as well. No good deed goes unpunished. I mean,
absolutely.
So he's talking about not only his dissatisfaction with himself, but his dissatisfaction with his relationships with other people, romantic and otherwise, that makes him buy things for the girls. So he's finding this disappointment in different sectors of his life in different relationships with people. So this person is basically trying to figure out, how can I be who I am and not have it turn on me?
Yeah, and it's all set to this really pretty melody though. That's what's really interesting about it, because it's still quite a joyful, that don't you get for being, it's still a joyful melody.
Yeah.
But it's really lovely. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There was an interview around this time that Destiny came out, right before Off the Wall came out, the Soul magazine that Michael did. And the writer said that Michael was seen in the industry as like the most kindest soul in the industry at that time. And that song and that comment just kind of brings things full circle, that he was just such a kind person who was always trying to help people. It didn't always work out the way he wanted it to.
Yeah.
But he never stopped trying.
Right. And I think that song was him crying out and knowing that whether it's intentional, no one knows, but him crying out saying, I'm getting ready to go for it. I know what my destiny is. And I know what the implications of it. I know what's going to happen as a result.
Yes.
So I kind of think that's why that song to me is so important. So, gentlemen, there's a couple of things that I wanted to also discuss. I know there was a tour, and Scorp, you brought it up. That there was no Off the Wall tour because they started the Destiny tour, the first leg, and then that second leg became essentially the Off the Wall tour. Which did extremely well. And then I know we talked about, I know Summer, you brought up the peacock logo. And I think that the cover art to me is, and I'm wearing my Destiny shirt right now. To me, it was very powerful because I think you have the brothers standing on their destiny where you had a storm, swirling around them. So I think that's so prophetic as well. And then again, you have, but then on the flip side of that, you got that peacock logo, which meant unity, right? Where they were trying to bring all of the colors together, and they were trying to bring all genres of music. And that's kind of what you hear on this album as well. But the one thing I want to get to as we wrap up this roundtable, and again, I feel like I could talk for another 4 hours about this, but I kind of want to know what's the ultimate impact of Destiny, and does it stand the test of time for you? And then I'm going to come back to that question. Is this a concept album?
It definitely stands the test of time. Absolutely. It's one of, I'm not saying it's one of my go-tos. To be honest, I don't listen to Michael Jackson every day. I don't listen to him like that much because there's a big emotional connection. So it's not easy for me to listen to Michael Jackson, if that makes sense. I can't just put him on in the radio or in the car. It's like, it's too big to kind of just listen to while I'm driving. I'm so emotionally connected to the music. Tragic 40-year fan, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it absolutely stands the test of time. Like I said, sonically, the production of this album compared to, like you say, like the Gamble and Huff albums, which were recorded by much more kind of seasoned professionals. And it's probably an issue with studios, and the kind of technological advancements that probably came. But it sounds, Blame It On The Boogie, you play that on the radio now, it sounds fresh as anything else that's come out. Recently, it's musically, sonically, it sounds fresh. But you play "Show Me the Way to Go," that will sound very much like the 1970s, very much like the 1970s. One thing I wanted to mention though was also because I had a conversation earlier today on social media that someone had posted about the Victory album. Was it a success? Was it a final victory, or was it like a final whatever? And got into a little bit of a conversation about that online and how noticeable, because you mentioned the tours, what ultimately was the Triumph Tour, and then ultimately, the Destiny's tour, whatever those tours were, and how noticeable the change in the makeup of the audience was by the time we get to the Victory Tour. Do you know what I mean? So like, if you look at any footage of the Triumph Tour in America, audiences are predominantly black audiences. By the time you get to the Victory Tour, that's not the case. And I know there was lots of issues with the pricing and people feeling that they'd been priced out of seeing the Jacksons on the Victory Tour. But it's just really fascinating because I do wonder, like, if Michael had toured separately for the Off the Wall album or the Thriller album, who would have turned up for those tours? Because like, the Jackson, this is why I always specify that I'm actually a Jackson family fan. I'm not just a Michael fan. Because the Jacksons had a dyed-in-the-wool fan base. They had their own pre-built fan base, pre-Off the Wall, or pre-Thriller. I just think it's a fascinating conversation that could probably be had for another 3 hours, really.
Summer, if Michael Jackson's name was on the marquee, they were coming.
I'm sure.
There
Yeah, I'm
was
sure
no
you're right.
point.
I'm sure you're right. Of course, yes. Yeah, of course you're right. What am I thinking? Of course you're right.
They were coming for sure. As far as this album standing the test of time, it absolutely stands the test of time. It still sounds fresh today, as Summer pointed out, and it is a quantum leap forward from the Gamble and Huff stuff. I have immense respect for the Gamble and Huff stuff. I really do.
Why is that though, Scott? Because like I said, they were the seasoned producers that were supposed to be the safe hands. Great songs. I mean, there's great songs on the album, but like you said, there is a quantum leap. Why is that? Because I'm really interested in why that is.
Michael had a vision for the music. He knew exactly how he wanted the music to sound. He described it in Moonwalk. You know, he wanted the bass to sound a certain way. He wanted the drums to sound a certain way. And he wanted, because the music ultimately reflects the artist, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if I put on this jacket, it's going to look different on me than if you put on that very same jacket.
Yeah.
So the reason why it's different is because you're hearing these guys in late adolescence, early adulthood, and you're hearing the sound of late adolescence, early adulthood. At Philly International, you're hearing the sound of guys in their 30s and 40s.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there's going to be a difference. So, I mean, not the youth don't always have their finger on the pulse, but 9 times out of 10, they do. So like we said, Michael Jackson is 20 when we get Destiny. Okay. So he's very young, still very young, even though we said we're closing the door on little Michael and he's an adult and all that. He's still very young. People called him a kid like through the first half of the 80s.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's that freshness of youth, I think, that gives you such a contrast between what we heard on Destiny versus what we heard in the Philly International. Is this a concept album? It absolutely is. But again, I think it was a concept album accidentally.
Yeah.
Because Michael's voice is the voice that's leading the proceedings through his writing. Now, I'm not talking about his physical voice. I'm talking about the voice of his writing through his pen and through the lyrics of this album. So we're listening to the thoughts and emotions of Michael. You know what I mean? So therefore, that's the concept. Michael struggled with adulthood, with dealing with the world, with dealing with fame, dealing with isolation, dealing with his own sensitivity. So that's the concept of this album, Michael Jackson versus the world.
This is the ending of the first chapter of the Jackson's whole story, and this is the start of Michael's story, in my opinion.
Yep.
You know, when you get from Steel Town all the way into this album, it's, you know, them breaking into their own as people, as artists. Destiny is also the start of what we all call as the Michael Jackson. You know, so everything from King of Pop, from Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad, it starts with Destiny. This is definitely a concept album because the themes, the subjects, everything all tie in together. Yeah, definitely a concept album.
Yeah, I 100% agree that this is definitely a concept album. It's one that is criminally overlooked, not only by critics, but by Michael fans, right? And so my whole goal was, in wanting to explore this era, was to get people to go back and revisit this album, but revisit it through the lens of what the career that you knew Michael had, right? Everything from the ad libs that started on this album to the themes the recurring themes that you would hear. Everything starts with Destiny. And as I mentioned in the intro, even Janet picked up on it, right? So I think this is a very important album. And I think I'm glad I had each one of you on today to discuss this important album and put this conversation out in the universe so folks can go back and listen to this album and give it the respect and appreciation that it deserves.
That's beautiful, Shawn. I just want to add one little thing about the Jackson family, because I've been a fan for years, and you sometimes get some fans who are Michael Jackson fans and almost remove him from his family in their fandom. And this is why I always specify I'm a Jackson family fan, because it's really difficult to listen to Michael Jackson and appreciate him fully if you don't listen to the music he recorded with his family. Because, like you say, that's the etymology. That's where it begins. That's where, like you say, like Blame It On Yourself, those kind of ad libs for Scream. That's where it comes from. I get into conversations with a friend of the show, Damien Shields, who's never seen Star Wars. I say to him, how could you not see Star Wars and be a Michael Jackson fan? I can't quite get that, because Michael was so inspired by Star Wars. He was so inspired by Steven Spielberg, but so inspired by Star Wars specifically, where the Force, it's got a lot of power. And then in the video for Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, he literally goes into kind of light speed right at the beginning. Those are references to Star Wars, right? And it's like, you almost have to fully appreciate Michael and his genius and his brilliance and his talent, you have to watch The Elephant Man, because there are references in Morphine. There's samples from The Elephant Man in Morphine, for example. You have to read Edgar Allan Poe to fully understand Michael Jackson's artwork. And you can't fully appreciate Michael Jackson without listening to the work he created with his family. And he is part of that family. He's not a distinct and disconnected from them. He comes from that family, and that's why he's able to do what he does later on. That's why Janet's then able to do what she does later on. And I think it's really important that fans tap into the Jackson family and their music.
Well, I agree. Perfectly said. All right. Well, that's it for the Destiny Roundtable. I want to thank all of you guys for coming on. This was a phenomenal, outstanding conversation. I feel like we could have gone on for another 3-4 hours. There's so much stuff that we left on the table, but I want to thank each and every one of you. And so before we go, I want each of you to tell the listeners where they can find you. So Samar, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm only on X or Twitter or whatever we call it now, at the MJAP, formerly the Michael Jackson Academia Project. And just to say, Shawn, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been a while since I've been on, and it's so good to be back.
It's great to have you. Jay, where can listeners find you?
Hey, you can find me on Instagram as Jay the Music Geek. And
Okay. Scorp, where can listeners find you?
If you want to find me out there in cyberspace, you can go to Instagram and find me as Sir Moto2. SIRM like Mary, OTO2. And if you shout me out there, then that's where you find me.
And also that outstanding podcast, Truth and Soul.
You can check out Truth and Soul Podcast on Instagram as well at Truth and Soul Podcast. TRUTHANDSOULPODCAST.
Good deal. Thank you, sir. And I am your special host today, Shawn Shackelford. You can find me on Facebook, Shawn Shackelford. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on X, and you can find me on TikTok. You can follow the shenanigans of me and my family. We are the Shackelfords. And I wanted to take a moment to, again, thank Jamin, Elise, and Charlie especially for manning Mission Control for this episode, for giving me this opportunity to really, again, like I said at the beginning, geek out talking Jackson's music. This was fun, and so I hope to do it again, and I hope you listeners enjoy this conversation. We had 3 outstanding voices here who are experts in all things Jackson, so I hope you enjoy it. And you can find the MJCast on all socials, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter /X. I believe also it is on Threads and Blue Sky. And then also the MJCast, there's a lot of great stuff and there's a lot of great material. And if you want to support the MJCast, just for the price of a cup of coffee, visit the MJCast.com/support and give what your heart would allow you to give. But again, this great content is made possible through your support and through your listenership. So we are certainly appreciative of everything that you can give, and we're appreciative of you listening and sharing this great podcast. So with that being said, this concludes the Jackson's Destiny Roundtable. I want to thank you all for joining us. And as I sign off, keep enjoying the work of Michael and the Jacksons. Keep living off the wall.